Hello everybody, welcome to your favorite Bronze Age Spider Man podcast. This week we will be reviewing a few guest appearances of Spider Man in other comic books. From June 1982 we have Defenders number 108, reviewed by G.I.Jolie and Ted Woods. From July 1982 we have Defenders 109, reviewed by Bex Luthor and G.I.Jolie. And from June 1982 again, we have Fantastic Four number 243, reviewed by Adam Peltier and G.I.Jolie. As usual, I am your co-host, Mike L., and I am joined by...
Mike?
Yeah.
Do we have to?
What, do this issue?
Yeah.
We have to. Sorry, guys. We got to do every 80s Spider-Man comic. All right, G.I.Jolie, take it away. Tell us, what is this issue about?
Okay, so we are going to discuss Defenders number 108. I want to weep, but I have to tell you what it's about. Okay, so we've read the one preceding this. So it picks up right where we left off in the last issue of the Defenders. I don't know exactly where that was, but I know it involved the Enchantress, and for sure Valkyrie's dead. So the Enchantress strikes up a deal with all of the Defenders that if the team is to bring her back a flower or a rose, that she will restore the spirit of Brunhild back into the body of, back into the shell that she has, placed in sort of like a trap. It's very convoluted, and even the comic is like, it's too complicated to explain. Mm-hmm. Like, literally in a box. We're not going to explain it. There's too much. So Enchantress transports the entire team to... I think they call it Paradise on the cover. So, yes, the entire team is there, and they encounter an alien woman and her, quote, thing, who is just dancing. And they have this flower that Enchantress wants, so it's up to the team to get it from these two beings in paradise. I can't believe that I drew that much of the plot out of it, or remembered even that much. There is like an allegory about love somewhere in there, but I am not trying very hard.
Don't worry, neither is the comic.
No. So yeah, like, it's weird because we find out while the Defenders, I guess, are adventuring in paradise, it cuts back to Enchantress, who is sitting on the lap of somebody who she calls love. And that's why the flower is for that being. And I can only assume she's going to stick it in the face hole part of his hood. I don't know. I don't understand or claim to understand the needs and wants of deities, but that is where we begin this discussion.
So yeah, I'll just say, Ted, I apologize that you had to read this comic. This is some of the worst art, again, that I've ever seen. And the story was incomprehensible. I honestly, halfway through, I thought I missed something because I didn't know what the hell was going on. But what was your impression of Defenders 108?
So, it did not take me long to just be like, okay, I'm going to skim through this one.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was also... I kept thinking about the Defenders TV show on Netflix and how Trish Walker's character on that is Hellcat, and I was like, just imagining how awesome it would be if they had like fully embraced that character in the show, and then Jessica Jones and everything. And so I was easily distracted from this story by imagining how great that show could have been. So anyway, what I gathered from the story was not a whole lot. I appreciated the idea of, like, half the Defenders team was like, oh yeah, we should totally do this. We should help this completely evil character. It's definitely going to trick us. And then the other half is like, no, this is unethical. We shouldn't do this. Really quick question. Do any of you know who the definitely not Etrigan from DC Comics character is that we see a couple of times? The yellow demon-looking character.
Oh, yeah. That's
Damien.
Gargoyle.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yes. Gargoyle.
Yeah. Who?
That's okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
We've come across him before. He's actually a pretty cool character, but in this story, he doesn't really do much, does he?
He just doesn't do anything, yeah. So I liked the idea of, like, the characters, the team, like, being split on something and not agreeing on
cool.
something, and then just be like, they're like, okay, then this half of the team is what's going to, accomplish this task today. And, God, the thing that dances, what a vision of nightmares that's going to be tonight. So, yeah, like, that, it was just such a weird story, and, yeah, very convoluted, but, yeah, like, I mean, it's another example of, like, well, we killed a character off, so we need to bring him back, so how are we going to do it? So, let's just throw a lot of story in, throw a lot of crazy artwork in, and by the end of it, we'll have Valkyrie back. So that'll be cool. So there's your comic, kids. So I guess that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's actually kind of weird. I'm looking at the end, and after it's all a total loss, like a zero-sum game, because Love ends up, for some reason, falling in love with Barbara Norris, whose soul is trapped in the body of Valkyrie, and he pulls her out of the body of Valkyrie so that they can be together away from the Enchantress. And then, oh God, do you know what? It's so terrible that I'm interested. This is a weird sensation.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I'm all for weird, like, stories and, like, weird premises, but it wasn't done right. Like, they didn't do any explanation. They didn't, like, the like strange monster character and the woman with the rose. Like, none of these, like, ideas fit together. Like,
No.
Maybe they were, like, some cool ideas on paper, and then they just smashed them together to be like, all right, here's the story. Because, like Jolie was saying, that is kind of interesting that this, like god-like creature falls in love with a normal human who's actually just the soul of somebody trapped in somebody else's body. Like, that's wild in itself, right? But it can work. It just doesn't. There's no setup. There's no payoff. There's, like, I don't know. It just... That's
exactly what we said, right? He just throws... J.M. DeMatteis just throws things into a pot and mixes them up, right?
Yeah.
There's no unity. There's no theme, really. My favorite thing with the story is definitely the disagreement over what they should do.
Right.
About if they should rescue her or how they should rescue her. That was cool. But everything else was a mess.
Right.
I do wonder, though, would this story have been better if the art was better? Like, would you have been able to stomach it more if the art was better? Anyone?
No, I feel like the art is really just as good as it could have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean,
like,
it's terrible,
keep
but
on.
it's not like the worst it could be.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the story is garbage.
I don't think it would have made it any better too, because of the fact that there's just too much dialogue. Like, even if this was great art, the dialogue and, like, the narration is, like, covering it all up. Like, we don't let the art speak for itself in this issue. So even if it was good, I don't think it would really matter.
Yeah, it's kind of the same problems we always have with every story by J.M. DeMatteis, who otherwise, like, I like his later career, but at this point I was not liking his stuff. I know, Ted, that you had mentioned that comics were much different back in the 80s than they are now. What is it specifically about this comic that sticks out to you as being completely different from the way comics are done nowadays?
Well, going through the pages again, I feel like I wonder if there was just this amount of pressure from higher ups or something like that to just have a million characters featured in this book or something like that, because I feel like there's just a lot of panels where it's like the artist is just trying to cram 5 different characters into each panel, and that's, I mean, even a good artist will have difficulty doing that in a lot of cases, because really it's like, okay, it's Hellcat is the one that wants to bring Valkyrie back, and Son of Satan, Namor, Hulk, and then they're along for the ride, and so like one way maybe to have improved this, or maybe just a modern take on it, would have been like, okay, this is Patsy on her journey to try to bring Valkyrie back or something like that, and it's just her or something. And now, granted, that it's not a Defenders book, but that's one thing that might have been way more interesting. And yeah, like another thing that kind of interested me about it is that it's, it's Patsy and her love of Valkyrie that's kind of the driving force here. Now in a modern comic, they probably would have made them have some sort of romantic relationship or something like that, but it was the 80s, that didn't exist yet, of course, in comics. So yeah, like I think that another way that kind of is kind of unique to comics of yesteryear is that like this whole like dancing beast with the 4 eyes and tentacles coming out of its tummy, like they maybe this is a benefit of comics of that era, is like they just created these characters just for this scene,
right,
and life went on.
Right.
But for today, we would have had a 6-issue miniseries backstory about these characters or something, and it would have they would have just added into the entire pantheon of Marvel Comics. And it's like, okay, there's merit to throwaway characters like that. And yeah, you look at that thing and you're like, yeah, that's definitely a throwaway character. So, so yeah.
Except for we're going to immortalize it forever on the front cover of this book.
Right.
Yeah, I guess that you could say that at least it may not be a good comic, but at least it's still a comic, right? At least it still reads like a comic. That's not really much to say about it, but that is one thing I'll give it, right? It does have story and art.
Yeah.
I have a question, Josh. What do you think about Spider Man in this issue?
Oh, was Spider Man in this issue?
Yes, I swear he was. I could see him right there. He didn't do anything, but...
Yeah, again, Spider Man is not part of the Defenders, correct?
No,
so
he's not.
Why?
I don't know
why
why
have
he's
him here? I don't think the Hulk is either.
No.
So, all of these characters, they don't belong in the story. Like, this should be Hellcat's story, and she is in a lot of panels and does say a lot, but doesn't do a lot. Like she there's nothing that she really does to further the action or further the plot. She, just like the previous issue, she's kind of just crying the entire time. I think a large reason why this story suffers, aside from the muddled plot, is that the characters don't have time to individually shine, which should happen in any ensemble, right? Like, why are all of these characters here besides the fact that, oh, it's a Defender story? Like, what is the Hulk doing on this mission? Like, how is he helping out? Like, what's going on in his mind? Or Gargoyle? Like, I'm not sure Gargoyle says anything in this. I think he's just floating along, like, beside everybody. Like, if this really is an ensemble story and a series of comics, why aren't we seeing those sides of those characters as well? And maybe what they're doing will give us insight to what's actually happening into the story, instead of stopping the action to have some narration to explain what's going on.
All right, so now we are gonna jump to another piece of shit. It's Defenders 109. Just when we thought we were done, there's one more issue of Defenders, and guess what? G.I. Jolie, it's your turn.
Okay. Let me breathe. Let me think about where we left off. Oh, yes. Valkyrie. She's come back to life, and she's ready to seek vengeance. How did she come back to life? I honestly... Oh, God. Like, just saying that has taken... All I can hear is Josh laughing.
Sorry.
It's taken the very life and soul from me. It has drained my life being. So what we get here is just a huge... what I haven't seen very often, which is Valkyrie and the Enchantress fighting for a large amount of panels and pages. Part of the, admittedly, what do they call them? The informal collection of the Avengers. So they even admit on the first page that, like, this issue is unnecessary. If it's so not the Avengers, the Defenders. So it's like, oh, so if this group of Defenders is informal, then why bother? But they bothered. So we have... So Valkyrie and the Enchantress are fighting, but Spidey and Doctor Strange they get kind of caught up in a fight with the Harpies. Somehow, in all of the chaos, two of them are banished to some kind of zone. I'm not sure what it's called, Mike. Do you have any idea what that's called?
Is it Valhalla?
No, it's
They were there before, I believe. I don't think...
Limbo? Was it Limbo?
Yeah,
it's
Limbo.
Like Hellcat and Hulk and Namor and whoever is already there, I think.
Yeah, they're in limbo, but no one seems to notice that they're in limbo. And then somehow, Enchantress is bested by. Valkyrie gets a ball and is able.
It's the plot device orb.
Yeah, plot device orb, and is able to best the Enchantress, and that's it. It just ends. And then suddenly you see that she is in Valhalla talking to... Who is she talking to?
She's
Father
an
Thor.
Yeah.
Sorry?
She goes back to Asgard and is talking to Odin.
That's it. She's talking to Odin. I don't know what about, though. Like, I had already checked out by this point.
Well...
So...
Just how bad Daddy is.
Yeah.
Let me just say one quick thing. This is by Jim DeMatteis and Don Perlin as usual, but the difference with this issue is it's inked by Joe Sinnott, who is the greatest Marvel inker of the 60s. He teamed up with Jack Kirby. He's famous for that. But this is also co-written by Mark Grenwald. And I'm only going to guess that the scene you're talking about where she's talking to Odin, I'm going to guess that was written by Mark Grenwald only because it's all about explaining continuity, which Mark Grenwald is obsessed with, right? Mm-hmm. So when they're having that argument, I thought it was really actually the best scene in the comic, but it's almost like they're going through every appearance she's had, and it's Mark Grenwald's way of saying, well, this is why that happened, that's why that happened, kind of explaining maybe these continuity inconsistencies. I'm not sure. But I did like that scene, but the rest of it was complete shit.
I think
Go ahead, Josh.
I think it was the best scene, you're right, but I don't necessarily think it was good either.
Right.
Like, I think it's just because it's the most coherent thing that happens in this issue, and it's because every single panel is shoved with words and bubbles describing what's happening, and it's just a bunch of dialogue and exposition. And yes, it technically makes sense, the story that's happening, but it's not good because it's just so much being thrown at us in these few pages. Like most of these pages are just bubbles. Like it's just all bubbles, and really all we get at the end of this like short little like interlude that's happening is Odin kind of abandoned the Valkyries and kind of cast them off. He did the same thing to Valkyrie as he did to Thor, with taking away the fact that she was a god and threw her to Earth, and then she got her powers back, and it's just kind of them forgiving each other and like saying that they still love each other, and then that's it, right? But it's just so much being thrown at us dialogue wise that I just don't think is needed. So much of this could have been just cut out, and really you could jump into the nitty gritty of what their beef is with each other and resolve it right away. We don't need to explain every single detail about their past relationship and what happened. We can have Valkyrie just show up and be like, yo, you abandoned me, you took away my powers, and you left me to fend for myself and die. Like, what's up with that? Odin's like, I didn't realize that that's what was happening, blah blah blah. They can fix their relationship and be done with it. There's just so much.
Becca, is this your first issue of Defenders?
No, I've read a bunch of Defenders before. Maybe not with you guys. I don't think I've like reviewed them on the podcast at all. But I've read a bunch of Defenders before. Not this one.
Wow, because you would have remembered this one, I think, right? What did you think of this one?
Or I did read it and I just blocked it out of my memory completely to save myself the trauma. I like Gargoyle. Gargoyle's my guy. I love him. Shout out to Gargoyle. Let's give him more screen time. I think this comic is best summed up by when Peter Parker is fighting when Spider-Man's fighting the Harpies, and he's like, "Isn't this Greek mythology? Whatever. Who cares?" Like that's this comic in a nutshell. He's like, "Wait, we're fighting Norse gods. Whatever. Satan's sons are gonna be like 4 pages from now. Who cares?" Like, it seemed like a whole mess of, they were trying to make things that didn't make sense prior to this make sense like now, but they didn't care enough to really do it.
Right.
It seems very like just shoving as much as possible into one issue. Like when Valkyrie's with Odin, it's a lot of talking, and I'm like, I don't care. Like, how are you making something that should be cool boring? Comic books should never be boring. I should never be like lazily reading panels and skipping words and sentences.
That's exactly, I think, what we talked about with the issue we reviewed with Ted, is that Ted was like, yeah, after a couple pages, I just realized I was just going to be skimming. And that's exactly how I feel about all the Defenders comics we've read, and many of the J.M. DeMatteis comics we've read in Marvel Team Up, is that at some point in the comic, I kind of just check out, and I go, okay, I get it. I'm just going to skim. There's too much text. There's too much dialogue. There's too much description. And this issue was the same thing. A lot of crap just thrown in, hoping to see what would stick. Like I said, I did like the Odin scene. Another scene I want to talk about. What about the scene where Hellcat is talking to... Who is this? Her mother? Oh, is this her mother when they're sitting down?
No, it's her handmaiden. It's like
her
nanny from her childhood,
and she's like,
right?
Come on, Dolly, stop being so maudlin. I'm the happy-go-lucky Hellcat, and nothing ever gets me down. And then
she starts sobbing.
Silent panel, and then Dolly, sob. I heard so much. It's just so ridiculous.
I know women and their emotions.
I hope that this is nobody's first story with Hellcat, because in these past few issues, including this one, Hellcat is the worst. Oh my god. No, Beck, if you think that this is bad, the past 2 issues have just been her crying.
I mean, I thought that we were done. Right?
And I thought that we were done. Now that Valkyrie's back, she kept crying, Valkyrie's gone, Valkyrie's gone. Now that Valkyrie's back, I thought maybe we'll finally get an issue where she's not crying. But no, or crying.
She only cries in this one.
Yeah.
Okay, but I don't think we've touched on the reappearance of a character that previously died. What do you guys think about Nighthawk coming back in the last page?
Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah,
who gives even a little bit? No, I'm kidding.
Kyle's back.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, but like, how did do I even remember him leaving? And when he did leave, when I think back on those memories, did I care that he died? No, not even a little.
What about this dialogue, guys? You're forgetting. Don't let the new duds fool you. It's me, your old buddy, Nighthawk, back from the dead. I mean, that's exactly what I would say if I came back from the dead. I don't know about you guys, but...
Yeah.
Look at my shiny new outfit.
Yeah.
What do you...
Don't
How
let the
about
new
where's my
duds
girlfriend?
fool you. Yeah. Good.
Is she sad that I'm dead?
Yeah.
I hope not, because I'm not.
Has she been crying a lot?
The whole time.
Has she been crying for the last 3 issues?
All right.
Okay,
So,
here's the thing.
Go ahead,
too.
Josh.
I've talked about this before with Black Cat, and even with Valkyrie in these Defender issues. These deaths mean absolutely nothing because there's no impact. They're killing these characters.
Oh yeah,
just
I hope that's
for
what I'm
the
hoping,
cover,
right?
To say this character's dead, and then they're going to bring them back with no explanation later on. It's just I hate it. I hate this so much. This ending is awful. Not that the beginning was awful or the middle wasn't awful, but this ending was just I hate these types of, guess what? I'm still alive. I'm still kicking. Don't worry about me. It's the worst.
Well, you know, go ahead, Jolie.
Like, we're supposed to believe that he's just hanging out in limbo, and the Hulk, Namor, and Son of Satan by accident found him there. Like, what if they didn't get into that fight and were never sucked into limbo? Does that mean that Nighthawk has just been hanging out there sewing his new costume?
He's getting some of Hobgoblin's costume dye, and he's fixing it up.
Yes.
Okay. We've talked about the story. We haven't even touched on the art. I said previously that this is some of the worst comic book art I've ever seen. Bex Luthor, what do you think about this art?
I love when all the women look the same. That's my favorite thing about art. Is you look at a male character and you're like, Doctor Strange, and you look at a female character and you're like, blonde woman. Which blonde woman is this? And then she has a different outfit, so you could tell. But there's some panels where she's not wearing her costume, or like she's in a different outfit. So I'm like, is that Valkyrie? Is that Enchantress? Who is that? And then she turns around, you see her face, and I'm still like, that doesn't help. And then like,
well,
or there's 2 types of women. There's young hot women and there's old women, but there's 30 million kinds of men. I judge art by specifically on how people can draw women, because it's not hard, especially if you can draw the Beast and Gargoyle. You can't give your woman a different nose. Like, it's frustrating. It's lazy.
I love having you on.
I don't want to blame Joe Sinnott, because like I said, he's one of the best thinkers in the business. And I respect Don Perlin because he drew Transformers when I was a kid, but this art is brutal. Like, it's just, you look at it and there's just no sense of design of the page. There's figures are awkwardly, placed on the in the panels. It's just so uncreative and just so dull. And even like the Beast doesn't look cool. Like, how bad do you have to be to make the Beast look not cool?
Well,
that's
Fox did it for a long time, so.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Also, I want to point out, this is a Spider-Man podcast, and we haven't even mentioned Spider-Man.
He's there.
Why is he in this story? Honestly, what does he do? Josh, does he do anything important in this story?
No.
And then, Josh. Go ahead, Jolie.
I think Josh is doing the exact same thing as me, which is flipping back to see where the last panel I saw him in was.
Yeah.
But you know what's hilarious is that we actually, in his last scene, Spider-Man's like, he's like, I need a little time to just web around and digest all the weird stuff we've been through. And then Gargoyle's like, actually, Mr. Spider-Man, that sounds like a wonderful idea. Would you mind if I came along with you? And then Josh and I actually read the issue. This leads into Marvel Team Up 119, which, by the way, I'm going to send to Bex Luthor because it's actually a pretty cool story.
It's so good.
Yep, it is.
Yeah.
Who would think?
Yeah.
I know, and it's the same writer, if you can believe that. So I don't know what happened, but
Well, yeah. Is there less women? Because then it's easy, right? Because then they're not crying all the time,
maybe
and you
that's
can give
it.
them character. Two bros,
I didn't even make that connection. Probably because I was skimming through this comic trying to finish it as quickly as possible. But yeah, it literally the panel of them swinging away is like the first few panels of that Marvel team up.
And remember, when we read that issue, I said, this is probably because J.M. DeMatteis was writing Defenders at the time, and he just wanted to have something to do
Right.
with Gargoyle. Sure enough, I was right. Okay, so here's the thing. This issue's a piece of shit. I don't recommend it. God forbid this is anyone's first issue of Defenders, because you certainly would not want to read another one. Josh, what do you think? Would you read another Defenders if this was your first issue?
No, I would not.
All right, okay.
I'm so tired.
Yeah, okay,
I'm so tired.
G.I.Jolie. What'd you think of this issue of Defenders?
I think the conversation about this issue of Defenders is a gold mine.
I agree.
Yeah.
Defenders
that's
was
true.
good at some point, but these issues
think-
are not good.
If we have to look at the whole saga of the Valkyrie in the last 3 issues, it's the better one out of the 3.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I guess so. Yeah.
I'm going to give credit to Mark Grenwald and Joe Sinnott for that.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know who she is. So.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Do you know what? No.
Just no.
Don't. Just forget that this happened in 1972 and continue to read. Just like read Squirrel Girl.
Okay,
God.
Bex Luthor, are you going to be picking up more Defenders after this?
Well, here's like my thought process when I opened up this comic. I saw the cover and I went, "Oh, this is kind of cool." I don't really like that pink stuff though. I hope that's not in more panels. But it is. And then the second page, I was like, "Oh, cool, Valkyrie." And then I was like, "That's a lot of text." And then by like the third page, I was like, "Oof, big yikes for me on this one." I'm gonna say no. Don't. And it sucks because it's like Enchantress versus Valkyrie. That should be cool. But that's over within like 9 pages, and then it's just people talking about how sad they are. I'm sad. I read comics to not be sad. What is this?
It's over within 9 pages. It's like half the book.
Yeah.
All right.
Gargoyle's in it, so love him.
We've given this comic more attention than it deserves. But my final question is, Bex Luthor, have we scared you off, or are you going to be back for more Spidey reviews?
If Gargoyle's in it, I'm in. Like, I love him.
All right. Good to
I don't know. It's just you keep giving me sending me these emails with these comics in them, and the first one is awesome, and then they progressively get worse, and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I don't even want to read this.
All right, well, we're looking forward to having you back then, because we got more Spidey coming up soon. All right, so
Is
now
Spider-Man
we're
going to be in those ones?
I hope so. So here we go. So now we're going to jump to Fantastic Four, number 243. And I don't know how much I should say about this, but I have read the entire John Byrne run of Fantastic Four, and I have a lot to say about it. But I probably, the last time I read the story was in the mid-90s. So it's definitely been a while. But I'll just explain. This is, once again, Galactus has returned. And I didn't read the previous issue, but what has just happened was that the Fantastic Four were fighting a guy named Terrax, who is another one of Galactus's heralds. So, you know, you have Silver Surfer, you know, you have... I don't remember the other ones, but anyway, so he's another one. So we start off this issue, and the top of the Baxter building has been completely severed off. I think the top 2 floors here. And we jump in with Sue Richards, the Invisible Woman, and she's talking to Johnny Storm's girlfriend, Frankie Ray, and they're kind of just basically reiterating what just happened so that the readers know. It's kind of John Byrne trying to be sneaky with his exposition, but it's not very sneaky at all. So then we jump over to the Avengers compound, or the Avengers mansion, and we touch base with Captain America and Jarvis and the Wasp, and they're trying to figure out what's going on, and Jarvis is looking outside. Oh dear! You know, okay, so they talk about how the power's been cut off, which is supposed to be impossible. But then Jarvis is like, oh my word, Captain America, look at the sky. What's happening to the sky? And then we cut outside, and the Fantastic Four are all wearing these spacesuits. And then we see, stars all behind them. And then we cut back to this wide shot. This is a pretty cool science fiction-y idea. We see that the entire island of Manhattan is flying through space. And apparently Sue Richards has created a force field bubble to protect everyone in New York or in Manhattan. But the top halves of the Twin Towers are in space. So that's why the FF need these, these miniature spacesuits. So they're arguing back and forth. And basically, the Thing just wants to get down to fisticuffs. But Reed Richards is like, no, we can't do that. We got to do what Terrax says, which is we got to go and deal with Galactus here. So Galactus is hanging out in his spaceship.
Huh.
And he's, he's philosophizing as usual. Oh, wait a minute. I thought, you know what, Jolie? I just realized you were supposed to be doing this, weren't you?
Oh, you're doing a really good job, so.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Yeah, okay. Is that what you're like, Anyway.
I don't
know.
You
You can
interrupt you.
No, you can take it from here, honestly.
Oh, where do we leave off? Stupid, silly spacesuits? Okay. Let's see here. So a space fight ensues with this Terrax guy, and the FF don't know what they're going to do. Well, 3/4 of the FF don't know what they're going to do. So they count on Galactus, and they go looking for Galactus, and they ask him to help because I guess Terrax is sort of like a protege of Galactus. And then Galactus is like, sure, I'll help you take down this small monster. And that it kind of just, goes from there.
Okay, should I pick it up from there?
Yeah.
So
Josh, you can pick it up.
Yeah, Galactus kind of he stops Terrax, and then after that he, while on Earth, decides that he's still hungry and he's going to feed on Earth anyways. And that's when the Avengers show up, and they also start to fight Galactus with Fantastic Four, and then Doctor Strange shows up, and then Spider-Man and Daredevil show up, and they decide,
there's not much.
I think we'll sit this one out. They don't want to get involved, but Doctor Strange ends up stopping him by using this spell that kind of creates pain from all the souls that somebody has tormented, I believe. And because Galactus has destroyed worlds and worlds and worlds, he's kind of knocked unconscious with the pain, and he's now dying. And at the end of the issue, we're left with a stinger where Reed says we have to save Galactus now. Well, although he may be somebody that wanted to kill us, he's still human.
Even though he devours worlds, and he's currently not doing that because he was just about to. We've foiled his plan to do it. Let's save him anyway.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Julie.
No, I was gonna say it's just like it's a good thing you took you took the story up where I left off, because you're so good at describing when the books become Marvel team ups.
Yeah.
God.
Thanks, Jolie. Appreciate that.
See, I'll just go ahead. I was gonna say quickly, I first got an issue of John Byrne's Fantastic Four when I was in grade school, maybe grade 8. So he had done like 50 issues or something. So I was like, oh, I'm going to get them all. Well, it took me like 5 years to get them all. So by the time I got the whole run, I was like 19. So I'm like, okay, now I'm going to read these. Okay, I don't even know if I got through the whole run, but I very immediately tried to sell them, couldn't sell them, and then gave them all away. So this was a very popular run in the 80s. It was probably the second most popular Marvel comic of the 80s after X-Men, as far as fans go. Rereading this issue, I can see exactly why I didn't really like John Byrne's FF. But Jolie, what did you think of this issue? I mean, this is probably one of the first issues of FF you've read. Well, no, you read the Galactus trilogy last year, right? For Nerdy Book Club. But that was Jack Kirby and Stan Lee.
Yeah, I think I understood that one more. Like, the language, while flowery in the way that it is, wasn't, and sort of like grandiose in that weird, like neckbeardy kind of way that comics have a way of being. Like, it was better. Probably because it was Stan Lee. He writes with his voice, and John Byrne writes with a voice that only dogs can hear. Like, sorry, I couldn't understand any of this book. It was terrible.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to say it was terrible. It was just that, again, it's like reading one of those comics where the way Roger Stern writes, he pulls you in, and the way this is written, it pushes you out.
Oh, yeah.
It's like you don't want to read it. That's how I can summarize this.
Yeah, like well, here's the thing. You want to read it, but your mind and your body physically rebel.
Yeah.
You start to read the words, and like it's as if some invisible force is pushing you into like the next room to eat a sandwich.
Anyway, Adam, have you ever read any John Byrne Fantastic Four before?
Nope.
Will you ever read one again?
I don't know.
Have you read any Fantastic Four?
No, I've read Fantastic Four. It's just I've read classic FF during like the Stan Lee initiation and then some later stuff from the 2000s, but this era, like, I know this is supposed to be an important storyline, but I'm with Jolie. The writing is horrible. There's just something very tropey about it. When people in comic books write characters to sound like they're comic book characters, where they're pontificating so much and they just sound so pretentious, this is what's going on. Like, Terrax. Like, first off, his name is Terrax and he has a giant axe, so you know. But second off, lines like, "What care I for the puny lives of a single city?" Well, who talks like that?
Nobody.
No.
Well,
now, I don't care if you're an alien. You don't talk like that.
Do you know who talks like that? Like, super comic book nerds describing comics. Or LARPers.
I think the key problem, and I think one of you hit on it, is that Stan Lee was we could argue, failed novelist, but he was an aspiring novelist who loved Shakespeare. So when he wrote Thor, he wrote the characters to speak like in Shakespearean English. When he wrote supervillains, they were in speaking kind of a vaguely Shakespearean kind of speech. But the problem with these writers is they're not imitating Shakespeare; they're imitating Stan Lee imitating Shakespeare. So that, I think, is the key problem. Is it seems like a lot of these 70s and 80s comics, although there are a lot of good ones, a lot of them are just so in awe of Stan Lee's writing that they don't really do anything new on their own. And at the time, again, this was very popular, but it makes it really difficult to read now. At least that's what I think. Josh, what do you think?
No, I 100% agree with what everybody else is saying. I mean, even down to, like, Thor speaking, like, it is supposed to be kind of, like, vaguely Shakespearean, but it just feels too much. Even here, like, even for Thor, it feels like too much. So, yeah, the writing is not great. I feel like, I think somebody said it before, like, we're not in the story, we're being dragged through it.
Yeah.
The things are really just happening so quickly, and it doesn't really seem like there's much effort with it either. Like, I don't know. I also don't feel a lot of struggle fighting Galactus. Like, it doesn't seem like the superheroes are having that much of a hard time with it. Mm-hmm. They show up and they defeat him. He falls. Mm-hmm. Like, it's just so strange. There's a similar story actually in we were just talking about it, the 90s Spider Man. 90s Spider Man and the 90s Fantastic Four and 90s Avengers and Ghost Rider, those TV shows all had a crossover where they're fighting Galactus. And I think it's like 2 episodes where all of these heroes keep coming in and they're all teaming up on Galactus, and it's such a struggle. Every new hero that comes in tries to add something to it, but nothing ends up working out. And then finally Ghost Rider shows up and he does the death stare, and he literally, like, it's like an entire episode of everybody struggling. Ghost Rider is just kind of like, F this. He literally rides his bike up Galactus's leg, grabs onto his face, does the death stare, Galactus falls, and then Ghost Rider laughs as he's riding off. Like, it's so great, but it really does show the struggle of, like, all of these heroes having to come together to fight him. In this, like, what actually do they do to fight him? Like, Thor shows up and hits him, I think, a couple of times. The Thing does a cannonball when Mr. Fantastic uses his body as a slingshot, and then Doctor Strange kind of like does that same kind of like soul stare, and then that's it. Like, I don't know, it feels like such a build up and no payoff when things actually start like happening. I mean, even with Terrax, like, they're like, be careful, he has this axe, we've got to do what he says thing, and then Galactus just shows up and blinks, I think, and he's done for. Like, I don't know. It's just, things just happen.
It just feels really cheap. I don't know. It's clear that John Byrne, he likes the 60s comics that he grew up on, but it's like he doesn't quite know how to replicate them. And I don't know. I guess my next question is, why does anyone have an idea why this was so popular in the 80s? Like, even today, if I go on like Facebook fan pages and I say anything, if I say one ill word against John Byrne, people like rip my head off. So why does anyone know why this was so popular? What's your theory?
Oh, I think it was the expanse of what they were writing. I mean, Byrne was writing these very big cosmic stories, and people ate that up. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the other big title was X-Men. Well, in the 80s, what were the X-Men doing? There was a lot of space-centered stories. So I think that was just something. The type of broadness of those narratives just really appealed to people at that time for whatever reason.
That could be it. Yeah, good point. Good point.
I mean, Star Wars and Star Trek were very big at the time too, so that definitely makes sense. So like that kind of resurgence of those types of stories. And I think it could also be that all of these heroes are teaming up for one large foe. And I think that's a large appeal for people, because that will bring in fans of Fantastic Four and Spider Man and the Avengers. Like, all of these people kind of have an in to this story. And people are very protective of their characters, right? So I feel like if you read this story as a kid and enjoyed it then you're going to be nostalgic for it and be defensive and protect it now.
Yeah, that's true.
Agreed, yeah.
Right.
Can we talk about something that is probably the most glaring thing in this issue?
Sure.
Hey, yeah. The Spider Man cameo.
Yeah.
Did anyone else feel like this was horribly out of character for both Spider-Man and Daredevil?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I mean, even if they felt like they couldn't go up against Galactus, that's fine, because maybe at the time they just weren't, like, A-list superheroes, where they felt like they would be more, dangerous if they were to jump in than, helpful. But at least have them swing in and start saving civilians, or getting people out of the way, or like evacuating the building that Galactus is falling down. Like, they're just like, well, nothing we can do. Like, it's what was even the point of the cameo then, right? Like,
yeah. Well, I think it was to show, well, we're in New York, so we got to show what everyone's doing. So I know Spider-Man and Daredevil are here.
Ugh. But we know it's New York. Like, we just saw the Baxter building get cut in half. Like, we know. It just seems like, I don't know.
Well, I think I know. Because I've seen this happen all the time in DC Comics. You have some hero that's maybe not quite an A-lister, and they just get throttled by some enemy. why does this happen? It happens because they want the big guns to be that much more powerful looking. They want to show how powerful Wonder Woman, Superman is, how ingenious Batman is to figure out how to fight these villains. And they do it at the disservice to discredit these other heroes. Instead of finding creative ways for the villains to defeat this first wave of the heroes, they just make the heroes incompetent. And I feel like this was John Byrne doing that. Saying, well, you think you like Spider-Man, you think you like Daredevil. They couldn't even try to fight Galactus. These are the real heroes.
Which doesn't... I mean, if you're talking about power levels, here we have Captain America who has no abilities, no superpowers. And he's in on this fight. And really, Spider-Man, you're going to tell me Spider-Man isn't on par with members of the Fantastic Four? I don't know. I think he is, So
I mean, even popularity-wise, I feel like he might be in the 80s. Is he not more popular than?
He's more popular, yeah.
Than most of these heroes. So like, it just seems weird that they would bench this extremely popular, strong hero to show the other ones when again, if you want to like show that he's not as powerful, he can still be doing something. It just seems out of character for him to do this. But then again, 80s Spider-Man, like Peter Parker, seems to be out of character every other issue. So maybe for this time, this is very in character.
Okay, so we've talked about the story. We haven't touched on the art. Again, John Byrne was at this time, probably the most popular artist working at Marvel.
How?
You tell me, Jolie, what do you think of John Byrne's art?
Okay, so his all I could think was like page digital number 6. His writing, because I stared at it for like 20 minutes trying to read it and trying to decipher what was going on, but his writing and his art is just as clumsy and unproductive as each other. I was so distracted by like the the star field.
Yes.
That I couldn't focus on deciphering what the dialogue was. And it's the same with every page. So I think it's weird because I think he suffers from like he's a not good enough. He's like not a Kirby, and he's not I don't know, like his musculature is off. Like his knowledge of anatomy is present, but he doesn't know what the musculature looks like, and that's all drawn incorrectly. You can see it in Cap.
Yeah.
He obviously knows how to draw robots because Galactus looks awesome.
Yeah, he does. He looks pretty good.
Yeah, but like there's just too much detail where there shouldn't be detail at all. And he fills those gaps the way that other artists do it, but like other artists do it better. And the book suffers for it, I think.
I mean, even down to the Thing, I feel like like what you were talking about with like the textures, he even feels off and kind of, I guess, off model from what the Thing normally is.
But just to explain that, at this point in FF, John Byrne had reverted the Thing to an earlier mutation, and so he purposely tried to bring him back to the way he looked in the early 60s, so that's why he specifically looks this way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But, Adam, what's your take on John Byrne's art?
I think it's okay, but I do agree with Jolie. I think there's points where there's just too much detail added that it becomes distracting. And I think for the most part, he actually has really good postures for the characters. The panels are dynamic, they flow into each other, but then there's some outliers. Like I'm looking at digital page 20 with Doctor Strange at the bottom, and his hands are, I don't know, they're all wibbly wobbly. Like
yeah, they look like ribbons.
They do. It looks like his fingers are tucked into his gloves, and like when you're a kid and you don't put your fingers in the gloves, and they're just kind of like
yeah.
And his neck, where is his neck? I can't really tell in this one either. And then Galactus's pose on the opposite side is just
on page 19.
Wow.
Yeah, like the word ribbon that Josh just said, the word ribbon is exactly what that looks like. It's like he's like, well, I know how to draw a banner, and that's what that does when it bends. So the human body must do the same thing, and this is an alien body, so let's just that's how I'm going to interpret that. It's like the panel before it too is really strange because it's like, I feel like maybe they pay attention to look at Thor's butt. I don't know how to say this more delicately, but like, it's very round.
What page is this on?
On 19.
Oh, the page before.
Yeah, digital 19. The page before digital 20 where we're discussing the mittens.
That is a strange ass.
Sorry, but Doctor Strange's glove hands, I did that earlier today, by the way. It just looks strange, and
not in a good way.
Yeah, not in a good way. And
yeah.
I feel like this is one of those artists that maybe learned how to draw from drawings. From drawings of other people. Yeah, and specifically comic books. They may have had at some point knowledge or tried to grasp the knowledge of anatomy, but it didn't exactly click. And this person learned from 2D drawings. Like, this has to be the answer. I don't understand. Because
I think
it's terrible.
I think you're 100% right. And the funny thing is a lot of people rag on 90s image artists like Rob Liefeld and even Todd McFarlane and people like that, because they clearly learned to draw from comic book artists. Mm-hmm. But I think the problem is that with them is that they were learning from comic book artists to learn from comic book artists. But so they're like twice removed. But this is still that intermediate where you're right. We know that people like John Buscema and John Romita and Jack Kirby learned from real life, and they developed as they got older. They improved as they got older. John Byrne arguably peaked at the beginning of his career when he was doing Iron Fist and Marvel Team Up, and then he did X-Men, and he was fairly good then. But at this point, what had happened was I definitely know his ego has gotten through the roof by this point, because I've read interviews with him where he talks about how great an artist he is and how much people love him. And you can see here, he's already starting to go down that road that destroyed his career, where he starts becoming obsessed with shortcuts. It's like any way he could figure out to not draw something, he'll do it. Any way he can figure out to, for example, he started inking his own pencils. Then he started eventually going directly to inks, which is not a good idea.
Yep.
Stupid, exactly. And at the beginning of the issue, you can see how, these opening pages with Invisible Girl and Frankie Ray, they're fairly well, they're clear. His storytelling is clear, I'll give him that. But it's kind of uncreative even with the angles, looking at the buildings straight on and these straight on shots of people's faces, and when then Captain America runs in, and it's all just very dull. And the thing is like I said earlier, when I was a kid, I loved John Byrne, and there are other artists that I've grown out of, like Todd McFarlane and Eric Larson and Art Adams. But at least those guys, when I look back, I can see why I like them. But honestly, looking at this, I don't understand why even I liked him, because his art is so plain and so dull. So I just don't, and I don't understand these people that just love him, They think he's a god, and I don't see it. But that's just me. And you, and you, and you.
I will say that there were a couple of moments where I thought that things did stick out for me that were pleasant.
Okay.
Like the next page, actually, after the ribbon fingers, where Mr. Fantastic and the Thing do that cannonball thing between the two lampposts. I really love the third panel on the page is roing, the sound effect in the background. Okay. You can see the Thing flying and hitting Galactus's face. I think that there are some fun moments in this issue. It's not all gloom. There are small nuggets throughout that stand out as good, but I think overall the issue didn't work for me, and I don't know if I would recommend this one.
No. I also want to say one more thing before we wrap up. You know the panel where Galactus gets knocked over and smashes into the building?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's not a bad shot. That actual figure is good, but the problem is, I think there's something about the way the building is and the perspective that really makes it mundane. It's like, if you're going to show Galactus, then for God's sake, put the camera looking up at him so we see how big he is, you know? Like, and I know that, I just want to say quickly, I know that Alex Ross probably did that best when he did Marvels, and even Kirby didn't really make him look that humongous when he drew him, but it just looks so mundane in this panel. I can't figure out what it is. What were we going to say, Josh?
I think it is the angle, like you're saying. I feel like the size is off too, because if you look at the next page, Galactus looks huge, like much bigger than he does.
Yeah,
in
right.
this panel.
Yep.
And on top of that, they had to put Galactus Falls in the top corner because it wasn't properly portrayed in the splash page.
Yeah. Well,
you know what
I mean, John Byrne himself probably. It's like he's compensating for his own inadequacies in the art.
Right. Like we see him get hit in the face in the panel before, and then he's leaning on the building, but then the next panel he's completely out for the count.
Uh-huh.
Like it's just I don't get him falling down and being out in this panel. Like it looks like he could have stubbed his toe and like fallen on the building. You know what I mean? Like it just didn't seem like a out for the count type of fall.
Yeah.
So when I flipped to the next page and saw that he was completely knocked out, I was surprised.
Mm-hmm. Even the cover, it doesn't look like a giant being attacked by superheroes. It looks like a toy. It looks like a big toy being attacked by little toys. There's no sense of the magnitude of how big Galactus is. There's just something off about it. It's not terrible, but it's not magical, you know?
Well, Mike, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you were asking why do people love this run, why do they love John Byrne? Yes, it looks like toys fighting each other. I mean, this is the dark side of superhero fandom. It's the whole mashing of action figures together. And I think that is something that John Byrne does. That I've seen here, I've seen in some of his other work, and I don't know, I just have to say I wouldn't recommend this at all because it just seems like it's a waste of time. Nothing really happens. And when you break it down, what does happen? Terrax is gone. Okay. They didn't do anything for that. It was all Galactus, and Galactus is knocked out. So why was Terrax even there in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good point. Jolie, do you recommend this one?
I recommend it if you want to read something that'll make you angry.
This is kind of, I'm sure all of us have gotten into debates with other comics readers where you kind of reach a point where you go, what? Like, no, there's like a line I won't cross, and I think this is it. I just don't get it. And I think when people today, even though superhero comics are more accepted today, I think when people think of a bad superhero comic, unfortunately, this isn't terrible, but it's not good. This is exactly.
You know what though? I will say I think that I get why people like this. Like I understand the appeal of the action figures.
Sure. Like
collecting all your action figures together and smashing them together and having fun.
Go.
Right? But I get that. It's not for me. I don't think it's for either of you guys as well. Like I guess you could kind of compare this to like the Transformer movies.
Yeah.
They're really bad, but they do so well because like it's just like stupid fun. Like it's just that like let's see how wild we can get with all these things that I've got, and like let's show you a couple of like really fun ideas like like Mr. Fantastic and Thing like teaming together to do the slingshot. Like that is fun, but the story is not fun. What happens is not fun. The character development is not fun. So I get it. It's just not for me, and I wouldn't recommend it to anybody.
I'm with you on that. Okay, on that note, I once again would like to thank Adam Peltier for joining us for Fantastic Four. I'd like to thank G.I.Jolie for joining us for Fantastic Four, and for also joining us for Defenders, 108 and 109. I'd like to thank Ted Woods for joining us for Defenders 108, Becca for joining us for Defenders 109. Hopefully we can have you all back again on future episodes. And Josh, you can take it from here.
All right. We want to know what you guys think about the comics that we're talking about, and also the podcast episodes. So you can find us over at Twitter at HCT Spidercast or at Comic Syndicate. And you can also find the podcast pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. That's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Find us there. Leave us a review or a comment because we'd like to keep that conversation going.
That's right. And next week we'll be back to our regularly scheduled monthly grab bag of Spidey comics. So until next Monday, this has been Here Comes the Spidercast.
All right. See you then.